Welcome everyone to this special video podcast episode of Bran'sTech. We're glad to have you here. So in today's episode, we are highlighting one of the many guests who have come here on the podcast and spoken with us. We're highlighting their story and catching up with them and truly seeing how they've been doing. But without further ado, this episode will begin in just one moment after these sponsored messages, so please stay tuned. Have you ever thought about hosting your own podcast? Perhaps you already have one. Well, if you're looking for a podcast website, look no further than Podpage. A website design tool helped to create a better experience for your listeners. And in fact, my favorite part is that it allows for each guest to have their own dedicated landing page. That way, you can highlight each of your guests and their amazing accomplishments. I'm proud to have Podpage as the sponsor for the Bran'sTech Catch-Up series. If you're interested in going to Podpage, go ahead and go to podcast.bkhtech.net/podpage. Without further ado, let's get into today's episode. Hello everyone, this is Brandon, and welcome to this catch-up interview. How are you all? I really hope everyone is doing well and is staying safe thus far today. So as we're getting into this interview, please give a warm welcome once again to my guest. My guest is a student at Virginia Tech, and not only does he enjoy aerospace, he also enjoys stargazing. And so please welcome back my guest, Zac Vaillancourt. Thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you, Brandon. It's my pleasure for being here.
Well, first of all, how are you doing today? How's everything been?
Well, I'm doing very well. It's a nice, clear evening here. I have been doing a fair bit of stargazing myself. I was actually bringing in my telescope equipment here before I got started with this podcast. And I finished my first year at Virginia Tech, so all things considered, I'm doing very well.
Well, I'm glad to hear that, that hopefully you were able to end it out well and everything, and that you're entering sophomore year in just a few weeks, hopefully.
Yeah, it's very exciting times.
And so for you in your first year, has anything changed, I guess, between the time we spoke? I think that was March or April that we spoke in 2022. I don't quite remember at the moment offhand, but I know it was rather semi-recently anyway.
Yeah, well, between then and April, I'm pretty sure that's when our last podcast was. I think a decent amount of stuff has changed. I remember I had my last calculus test right before I was talking with you, and since then, I finished all of my finals. So I completed my second semester, which I think went better than my first semester as a whole. And I completed my first year. And with that, I was able to do well enough GPA-wise to declare my major. So now I am officially an aerospace engineer as opposed to a general engineer. So that's what's changed. And then also, in addition, I got a position as a mentor within my living learning community. I know we talked a bit about that the last podcast as well, but now next year I'm going to be helping people out who were in my position last year. So I'm going to be showing students around what tech has to offer, what our living learning community contributes, and how we can help new freshmen at Virginia Tech to be aspiring engineers.
Well, I'm glad to hear that. That so much has happened, and wow, that is a lot that's actually happened. And although hopefully you did do well in that test that you were studying for, though.
Yeah, I did well enough to get in a good position for a final, and the podcast was just the break, relaxation, motivation. I think that was what I needed to get myself going.
Well, I'm glad that I was able to help. And so, I've always said that, that these podcasts are always, helpful, inspirational, and all of the above. I'm just didn't know it could help you prepare for a math test, but I'll have to add that. I'll have to add that to my resume.
Yep. It would be my pleasure, yeah.
Well, yeah, and so I guess, for you, what are some of the other things, I guess, that you have been that you have been doing. And actually, I do want to hear more about the mentorship program that you are getting into. That sounds really interesting.
Yeah, I'd love to. So right now at the second, it's summer break. I'm working at my part-time job at a mini golf center on a street where I live. So I've been working that a lot. I've been getting more hours. So I've been doing a lot of work there, getting used to seeing all of the new hirees since I was gone and interacting with them. For my mentorship program, towards the end of my year after our last podcast, we had a weekend where we basically learned what it meant to be a mentor and an upperclassman leader. So for a bit of context, an upperclassman leader is what anyone who helps run the Galileo and Hypatia living learning communities are. A mentor is within that upperclassman leader position. It's a role. So you can be an upperclassman leader but not be a mentor, but you can't be a mentor without being an upperclassman leader. So with that in context, for that weekend, Saturday was just upperclassman leader stuff. It was from 9 to 5, so pretty much all day in college terms. And then Sunday was also 9 to 5, but for the mentor position. So for that, what we did was we just went over everything. We did a bunch of ice-breaking activities. I was surprised at how many activities we did instead of just strictly lectures on procedures and policy and paperwork. So that was day one. Day two is the same thing, but for mentorship. And at a bit of a rough start since I woke up with like 30 minutes to get to the building, which was across campus. So that was a rude awakening, but it was also very fun. Also a lot of ice breaking, and I enjoyed my fellow mentors, and it occurred to me just what I would be undertaking, helping these students. And for just a little bit more context for the mentorship position itself, for 10 weeks after the official first day of school, I will meet with a group of mentees near where I live on my section of the hall once a week. And with that, every week, I'll be going over a couple of stuff about the Living Learn community itself, just describing what options exist for, brand new freshmen who have probably never been independent of their parents before. I'll be going for stuff about the community. I'll be breaking the ice with them, getting them out of their shells now that they're in college. And I will be writing down highs and lows, as silly as it is. It's just seeing where they're at in real time for those 10 weeks as they progress through college. And overall, I think it will be very exciting.
Well, that sounds exciting. I mean that you're able to be a part of such such a great program, and being able to have that impact and impression on new students. It's one of those things where it's like, I wish I had a person like that. And I would say that I've had plenty of people who I guess could consider themselves role models or whatever within my life. But still, like I guess the bond between you and someone you're mentoring, it's truly a special one.
Yeah, I agree. And that's partially what inspired me to be a mentor in the first place. My mentor from last year, he was very chill as a person, but he was also very good at his job. And I met a lot of the people on my hall. So I don't know if I would have done that normally without my mentor or not, but between that, reiterating the resources I had available that I frequently used after those mentor meetings, all those things considered, it was my former mentor was my inspiration to be a mentor this year.
Oh, well, I'm glad that, that was able to, work out for you. And then not only that, like you said, being able to inspire someone else to, I just hope that, which I'm sure you will, if not numerous people, but yeah, have that impact on the people that you mentor down the line, and just, keep the cycle going.
Yeah, I'm also looking forward to that. And it's not forced or anything. I just genuinely want to help people.
I'm just really just so glad that, that you, are so interested in this. And this is something that you're clearly passionate about and wanting to help others. That's sort of like, that's actually the reason I started, this podcast, all my content in the first place was to help others. And whenever I hear that other people share that passion, I mean, it always, I guess, I don't know, it always just is like, oh, it's like I'm just really glad that I had a chance to, to know this person, have these conversations and everything, because, you really don't know, what a lot of people do, especially in their spare time, because I'm sure a lot of people are probably like mentors or have these sort of, bonding and relationships, with mentees and all that other stuff that, they'd probably never mention. And so, I mean, I'm just so glad that I was able to hear about that, because, I mean, we had been speaking, I mean, semi-regularly, ever since we recorded the podcast. I had no idea.
Yeah, I agree. And both before and after our very first podcast, I looked onto your website to see more of previous guests' podcast, and we had this discussion extensively, but there's a good acquaintance of mine who I met through Virginia Tech and my Living Learn community, who has been on this podcast fairly frequently, and I saw him in passing, just, hey, what's up, on the hall. But when I talked to you, we were both very surprised that we both knew about him. Between that and then appearing on the podcast a multitude of times, I took it upon myself to listen to those. So that was just astonishing. And then getting to your point about not knowing about what people do in everyday life, I also agree. A different guest who was the most recent person on the podcast, I knew her from Summer Academy, from the Virginia Space Grant Consortium. I touched on it a little in my last podcast, but I knew that during that role, she dealt with understanding space law and policy for a certain amount of weeks in our pre-academy assignment. But I looked into her podcast. I was like, oh, I know this person. I'd like to listen to more about them. So I listened. I was very surprised at how many external influences were on that decision. So I listened and I thought, man, she didn't choose it spontaneously. There was a lot of deciding factors that I had no clue about as a person. And granted, this was during COVID, so I only saw her through a screen, just like today, but for multiple days. But I just had no idea about what other people are doing, and it's just very astonishing and very satisfying to hear what makes people want to help other people.
Wow. Well, I had no idea that, one, thank you so much for listening to the episode. And not only do I appreciate it because I hosted it, but you being able to hear all of those different people's stories. And that's the reason I do this. To be able to share these stories and everything. So, I'm just so glad that these stories were able to touch you and that you literally made a personal connection with them, which, when I had first heard about one of them, I don't know, it just is always so interesting to me, and almost like it's a small world thing. It's just like, wow, it's like, it's like, I know some of these people have similar stories sometimes, or do certain things, at the same place, but it's like the fact that they know each other and I had no idea. That's a first for me, at least to the best of my knowledge.
Yeah, and if you keep having these podcasts the way where I doubt it'll be the last time.
Yeah, that is 100% quite true. And so I guess shifting gears a little. So, as we mentioned earlier on in this interview, but then extensively in our podcast interview, which I did look it up, we recorded on March 31st of 2022. And it released like about 2 weeks later. And so semi-recently. And so, what was I going to say? Oh, yeah. And so, with that being said, I know one of the things that you mentioned extensively was your stargazing, and you had mentioned earlier that you were just taking it down, like right before your telescope and everything, like right before we had got on this the call. But have you been able to do a lot of stargazing recently? And did you see the eclipse that happened like a few weeks ago. I completely, unfortunately, missed it, but...
Oh, well, yeah, I got summer is my time to stargaze just because there's, at least in college, there's no school assignments. What I've done starting junior and senior year when I first purchased my telescope, what I would do is I would set up a tent that we had in our backyard for stretches of clear nights, and I would just camp out and stargaze the entire time. For a little bit of context, my dad, he got a small tent for my sister and I as kids when we first camped in our backyard. But as we got older and bigger, he ended up getting like a really huge tent that was like family size. We could fit 4 cots if we wanted to. We went over to a state park with our cousin, and it was like a mobile house. It was really big. So now that we have that one, I've been using that original smaller tent as my own. So I would basically set up my equipment. I would stargaze for past midnight easily, and then I would just sleep in the tent and wake up, and then have a nice summer day, rinse and repeat. So as for this summer, I've absolutely been doing that. I have been testing out a bunch of equipment I got over Christmas and winter break that I haven't used much because of college. And then also, to mention the eclipse, I absolutely did stay up for that. It was a miracle that we got clear skies, because all of my astronomy friends from the astronomy club at Tech, most of them were still either in the western part of Virginia, Blacksburg, or were in different states. So some of them, they got clouded out, and I was very sad for them. But I did happen to get like a miracle stretch of clear weather. So I got some absolutely gorgeous pictures of the eclipse I will send to you later. And as of recently, one other thing I'll add is, in addition to stargazing, and actually the reason why I set up today, and yet I'm still in here instead of stargazing, is that we're trying to get some more promotional content out for our astronomy club. Since I mentioned in our previous podcast, we've been having a bit of a resurgence following old leadership. So what I did is I got a tripod, a separate tripod with my phone, and I did a time lapse of me setting up my entire new setup. So I did that. And while I was out, I actually found the moon, and then I decided to show my parents, who, since they have work tomorrow, usually are in bed by now. So that was a very nice experience. And between that, camping outside for a couple weeks before this interview, and just getting all my equipment set up, I've absolutely been stargazing a lot, and it's been really nice to keep developing my hobby as I go through college, now that I'm minoring in astronomy.
That is all, really exciting. And this is apparently a really eventful day for you then.
Yeah, absolutely. I woke up, I had a friend of mine come over just to play some video games, who, funny enough, earlier I also tried to get him stargazing. But unfortunately, as I was testing out set equipment, I ran into a couple technical things. So we didn't actually end up stargazing. I got it perfect just in time for him to leave. So he came over today. We just played some video games, caught up, since he is at Thomas Nelson doing the 2 and 2 program and will eventually be at Tech. So I hung out with him today, did a few miscellaneous things. I responded to some messages for the astronomy club, had dinner, and then that's when I started setting up my equipment, setting it down, and then, yeah, now I have this podcast. So when you put it like that, actually, it has been a really eventful day.
Well, I'm glad to hear, this summer is all working out for you. And so do you have any other additional plans for the summer going forward over the next several weeks and months, this being June 2022 as time of recording?
Yeah, I do. So far I've just been working part-time. I'm doing that for about a week and a half, but afterwards we are going up to Massachusetts to see my Grammy. There was a stretch of time from sophomore summer of high school to senior year of high school where I didn't see her. So I saw her freshman summer and then senior summer. So I was really sad not to see her. So then we went up, we had a great time, even though it was a little different now that all of the other cousins up there were also grown up. But I got to hang out with her. And when I heard that there was a time to see her this summer, my dad and her worked it out, I was ecstatic, because I just really enjoy seeing her, and I really value that time, especially as I become an adult and, just a change in life and having more career focuses and aerospace stuff to do. I just think it was very nice to get a chance to see her. So I'm going there in 1.5 weeks. That's actually one of the reasons why I was setting down my stuff, not just to take it down, but now I have to get ready to pack it, since up in Massachusetts, where she is, she's 45 miles out from Boston. It's not as light polluted as it is here around Yorktown, which is where I am right now. So with that, I'm going to stargaze there. I'm going to do the same thing I did with my tent, just stargaze out in her backyard and then come into her house. And that's just later this month. In July, my dad and I might go to a state park. I might have mentioned in the last podcast, but it's called Staunton River. We went on a moonless night and also stargazed with my setup. And it's very nice since it's a dark sky rated park in Virginia. So I have Grammys to hang out with her and then stargazing at Staunton River. And then last but not least, as I mentioned in the last podcast, I am doing a summer academy with the Virginia Space Grant Consortium at NASA Wallops. And since that last recording, what's changed is that I actually I requested to have another week onto my schedule, since they emailed us saying, hey, there are some more spots available if people end up not showing up or losing interest. So I got 2 weeks at my summer internship instead of 1, which is very nice. And after listening to, very recently, they had their orientation of sorts for us interns and the master teachers teaching the summer academy. They mentioned in passing that they might have a clear night to stargaze, since NASA Wallops is also a huge space STEM related facility. And in my head, I was ecstatic about that. So I'll just bring my smaller telescope down there. So to sum all of that up, I'm going to see my Grammy later this month. I am going to go to Staunton River State Park with my dad sometime in July. And then towards the end of July and early August, I will be doing my 2 weeks at the Virginia Space Grant Consortium Summer Academy. And then I'm going for my second year to study aerospace.
Wow, this is quite an eventful, remainder of 2022 that you have lined up. And this is only June. Imagine, before the end of the summer, how much stuff you'll have lined up by then.
Yeah. One thing that I've noticed passively, but I always try to bring up consciously because I realize its significance, is that in high school and every other education before, they call it summer vacation. In college, they call it summer break. And I'm starting to see why that's the case, just because we still have stuff to do despite not having summer assignments. So it is a very interesting dynamic that I've noticed.
Yeah, that is 100% true. And I know for me, I've even gone from essentially spring semester to my internship. Then I'm going to go into fall semester. I have to think of which season came next, and then so on and so on and so on. And so it's like repeat the cycle. And so a lot of time, I remember today is Monday when we're recording this, and we're asking people, how was your weekend? And I was like, there was a weekend? I don't remember. I honestly just thought yesterday was I knew the last time I saw them was Thursday. I just thought that was the next day. It's one of those things you really need to make sure you take time for yourself, but then even then, perhaps look at the calendar at some point. And so, yeah, I'm trying to do a better job of looking at the calendar so I know which date's which. So that's a part of my personal, I guess,
that is very
things to work on for the summer, I guess.
And since today's Monday, yes, I did have a weekend as opposed to the last time I recorded, which I'm pretty sure was a Thursday.
And so, while we're still speaking, is there anything else that you would like to add on to this? And even anything else that maybe you didn't mention in the first time? Truly, the floor is all yours. I'm just so glad to be able to speak with you again.
Ooh, that's a very tough question, because since it's summer break, I'm still digesting my first year, because I think it is often overrated or underrated saying, hey, I just finished my first year, whereas I believe, if I remember correctly, the grade point average in my entire Live and Learn community is a 3.1, since we're all freshman students. And I think College of Engineering's average is less than the 3.0 for engineering. So saying that I got above the 3.0 threshold to choose my major by a significant margin is really remarkable. So to summarize it, I think I definitely have done well my first year. I have a lot lined up for the summer, and I do think a lot is changing as I go into my second year. Just I have a lot going on. It's very nice to be in these podcasts so that I can help other people, and it will be very nice next semester to be a mentor and also serve a helping role to freshmen. So I'm very glad to see how I've changed in these past couple months since our last podcast. And I think it's just very nice that college is changing me as a person, and I get to share these changes with you, Brandon, and everybody listening.
Well, I'm glad that you are able to as well. And hopefully, months and years from now, you're able to, to look back at that and, look back at this and the podcast and see, how much has changed, how much has progressed. And, be like, oh, I was really excited to do this one thing that didn't work out. But this other thing really did work out. And so, I'm overall just very excited to see what the future has to hold to you. And of course, please keep in touch. I know that we already are now, but even still, I absolutely love hearing from each of my guests. What they've been doing, what's new, and can I help you with anything? That's always something that I always try my best to do.
Oh, absolutely. And I'll definitely keep in close touch with you as the summer goes on. And again, thank you very much for having this opportunity to talk with me and get to help other people out.
Oh, yeah, of course. And like I said, I'm just so glad to have this chance to catch up with you. And hopefully before the summer's over, we're able to chat offline again as well, because it's like there's almost not enough time to meet with people anymore, especially as college students. And so I want to do my best to sort of, make time for that, because like I said, I really do enjoy being able to hear what everyone's up to. And so, yeah, I just can't wait for what the future has to hold.
Yep, absolutely. Only time will tell.
That is quite true. That being said, thank you so much, Zach, for everything and for coming on here a second time now. It's truly always a pleasure. And of course, you know that you're always welcome to any of my platforms.
Oh, thank you again, Brandon. I've said it, I think 3 times now, but it is absolutely my pleasure to be here. And it's very nice to have these. Yeah.
Oh, yeah, of course. And for those of you listening, have a great rest of your day. Enjoy your summer if it's still summer. If not, enjoy the next summer and all of the days. I'll see you all next time. Take care, everyone.